Hi, Anna.
Hey, Shay. How's Peru?
Ooh, Peru is incredible. I am currently in Arequipa, where the people are warm, the food is delicious, the weather is superb. I'm escaping the New England winter, so I really can't complain.
I'm so envious. You're really living the digital nomad dream right now, huh?
I am. And it seems that a lot of others are too. In fact, just the other day, I was reading in a cafe. Well, really, I was people watching.
As one does.
Right. And I got to talking with this backpacker who told me that he was in Peru for 6 months and that he had just landed a job teaching English.
Uh-oh.
So naturally, I had to ask him if that was his profession or if he was doing it just because. And he told me that he hadn't taught before traveling abroad and that he just figured he would take advantage of being a native English speaker. So he got a quick certification online.
Yikes. A quick cert, huh?
And that, my friends, is what brings us to the topic of today's episode, the benefits of formal training as a language teacher.
Hello, and welcome to the Teacher Think-Aloud podcast, a podcast for reflective practice for teachers of English around the world. I'm your co-host, Anna.
And I'm Shay. And we should start with a disclaimer, Anna. This episode might prove a bit controversial.
Yeah.
Is it necessary for teachers of a language to have received formal training in preparation for their teaching?
Definitely controversial. And so I think maybe we need to recognize the fact that both of us have master's degrees in TESOL or applied linguistics in my case. And according to our Twitter poll, 50% of listeners who participated have an MA or MED in TESOL, while the other 50% have a TEFL certificate. So we come from a certain biased perspective. Both of us, I think we really value the formal training that we received.
Definitely. I got my master's back in 2013, and there are moments where I wish that I could go back in time and go through that process again because it really was just so enriching for me. And so this topic of formal training comes up because we have seen an uptick in the last decade or so in, traveler blogs illustrating these backpackers who travel the world and pull you in with their flashy headlines like, "Want to travel the world? You can teach English anywhere you want." And so as a person who has gone through years of formal educator training, it's hard not to be, mildly infuriated by taglines like these.
Well, that's because one thing that does happen, and this is what bothers me, is that it kind of cheapens English teaching and it reduces whatever kind of salary a highly trained teacher might be able to get. And so I actually have to bite my tongue. When I'm traveling, I love doing free city tours. They're a great way to meet people. And usually on these tours, I meet backpackers, and I've met backpackers who choose to teach on the road. I mean, I like to backpack, don't get me wrong, but I'm not a backpacker English teacher. And you're a digital nomad, Shay, but your work is US-based, right? So I meet people who've just sort of picked up ELT as a side gig and picked it up. And it's really hard for me to be like, wow, what a great opportunity for you. Because under the surface, as a TESOL professional, I feel a little disrespected.
Totally. So we do recognize that there is this innate privilege in being an English speaker, right? We've talked about it on previous episodes.
Yeah.
And I think that there is this sort of understanding that being an English speaker, you can go anywhere in the world and just exist, like in the most natural way for you and be successful and make money.
Yep.
But I think that sort of does create this misplaced confidence. And I call it misplaced because in so many different areas, the less you know, the more confident you're going to be, right? And obviously, the example of a backpacker teacher with no training is one extreme. Right. And we're not saying that everyone needs the same formal training that we've had, but we are arguing that some combination of training and experience is needed.
Especially if we reflect on our experience.
Especially if we reflect on it and connect our experience to our training and ongoing professional development.
Right.
So, I mean, the issue of this archetypal backpacker teacher is also that I think you've probably had an experience when people ask you like, hey, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I teach English. And some people kind of like brush it off or brush you off. Like, oh, that's not impressive, right? Because anyone can teach the language they speak.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people just think that all it takes is just like, oh, you speak English, so you can just be a native speaker and go for it. And the quality will be totally the same, right?
Yes. And so when we talk about teaching EFL, or English as a foreign language, a lot of places are looking for a native English speaker because they value communicative language skills. Mm-hmm. They just want their pupils to, be able to converse in English. And that's swell, right? But being a native speaker of a language doesn't just automatically make you an effective teacher of that language.
Nope.
And Anna, you and I both study languages for fun.
Right.
And we've worked with people who are native speakers of our target language. And, there are a lot of times when we say, well, why is that? Like, why is that how it works? And sometimes native speakers can't explain the why. Mm-hmm. They're like, I don't know. It is how it is.
Yeah, totally. Like when I was searching for a Hindi teacher for myself, anytime I saw someone who was a native Hindi speaker but didn't have formal training in teaching the language, I would just like skip over that candidate. Like I needed to see some kind of experience with this, some kind of study of how people learn languages. And so I ended up going with a non-native speaker who is amazing. I hate taking work away from a native speaker, but at the same time, I'm not looking for someone who can just speak to me. I'm looking for someone who can really understand how to help me grow. And I think that there's this nuance that comes with formal training. Absolutely. Like you can have plenty of natural talent. And yes, there's a benefit to communicating with a native speaker because you're learning to interact with more authentic language. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, beyond just potential natural talent a teacher can have, having a deep understanding of the layers and the reasons for, especially the reasons for why I am doing something, why I'm employing this or that approach or technique. Knowing about the deeper layer, I think, really helps make stronger decisions about where to take someone in their learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree that having that sort of foundation is really helpful in informing pragmatic teaching, right? Not just doing something because it's fun. Mm-hmm. Sure, learners want fun and engaging things, but there's got to be more rationale or a deeper rationale to support those fun and engaging activities that these institutes and learners are often looking for.
Yeah, I like that word rationale. I think the mark of a good teacher is, a teacher's not going to go through like every detail of a rationale each time they make a choice, a pedagogical choice, right? But if they go back, they're like, oh yeah, I did that because XYZ reason, contextual reason, individual reason for, this learner or this group, whatever it is. All of that is based on experience combined with some kind of underlying understanding of how this works, how these different approaches connect to the way different kinds of people learn.
I think having a stronger background as an educator only creates stronger learners. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier being language learners ourselves. And I think actually that's why when you are a teacher of any language, you should be a learner of other languages as well. In learning another language, you get to understand acquisition and purposeful language learning, and then the difference between them. And I think that my background in learning languages is ultimately what showed me that being a native speaker of English is just not enough.
Yeah.
So my undergraduate degree is in Spanish language and literature, and in my higher level courses, I worked with mostly native speakers of Spanish, and I always appreciated the confidence that they would exude in speaking their native tongue. Like I wanted to get to that level, right? Mm-hmm. That's a thing, right? Native speaker confidence. Mm-hmm. But I remember asking my classmates to explain something to me, why something was the way it was, and often I was met with blank stares. Yeah. So either they really didn't want to help me, they were sick of my questions, or they were at a loss. So that native speaker confidence and knowledge is valid, but I would argue that it's limited. And if you don't have that, you have to find confidence in other places. And so that's something that pulled me towards graduate studies in TESOL. I knew I wanted to work with language learners, but I also know that being a native speaker isn't enough. It doesn't give you the tools that you need. So my formal training was what gave me more of that confidence to actually stand up in front of a classroom.
Totally. My undergraduate degree was also in languages. I was studying French and German. And so I went off like right out of undergrad and I went and did the TAPIF program in France, which stands for Teacher Assistant Program in France. I had very little experience. I had worked in the writing center and I'd taken a course on how to teach writing in undergrad. That was really cool, but that was a very small glimpse into the world of teaching. So, I went into my assistantship with very little background. And the main reason initially for going was I just wanted to live in France.
Mm-hmm.
So, sort of a backpacker teacher.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but I took it really, really seriously because that's who I am.
Of course.
I spent a lot of time planning lessons to make engaging learning experiences for these high school students I was working with, and the teachers gave me more and more independence in teaching the class. And that was really great. I think that's what drew me ultimately to pursue applied linguistics and TESOL. So then once I entered my MA program and I started really thinking more deeply about all of these, what language learning is and how pedagogy practices connect to how language learning works, how people work, it all kind of clicked. I'm like, oh, well, that thing worked because, I did it by chance, but it worked because of this thing. So yeah, I have a much better orientation because of that initial experience.
Mm-hmm. And that experience is critical. I've definitely met teachers who haven't had the opportunity to try out teaching before getting into it fully. So I think that short-term programs like the one you mentioned and, Fulbright programming can be really advantageous because they allow you to stand on the observation deck and decide from there whether your curiosity has been piqued.
Yeah, and programs like the Fulbright Teaching Assistant Program are very positive because they're not that low entry point. They're competitive. You really need to show your motivation. I think they're a great stepping stone into teaching.
Yeah, actually, a few years back, I had the chance to facilitate the pre-departure orientation for a group of Fulbright TAs.
Oh, right.
And it was super rewarding. And I will admit, I was a little skeptical at first because I wondered if I was going to encounter a group of self-proclaimed saviors from the US, young people who had been steeped in the notion that they were able to teach simply because they were born into the language.
Right.
And that wasn't what I found.
Good.
These young people were, I know I have to stop being so pessimistic, but these young people were genuinely curious and really wanted to learn whether teaching could be for them. And were doing so strategically and heeding the advice of trained educators along the way. It was really great.
That's great to hear. Yeah. If you haven't experienced it in some way, I highly encourage, people who are in the position of shifting into TESOL as a profession, or listeners, if you know someone who might be interested, encourage them to do a program like this. There are volunteer teaching assistant positions all over the place.
Mm-hmm. And so I think an important distinction that we're making is everything that we've highlighted so far has been a TA position, right? Where you're not going in and saying like, I am your teacher now. I've never done this before. I'm just pulling everything out of thin air, right? There's a huge contrast between someone who just rolls into a classroom thinking that they know everything just because they speak English versus a person who enters an assistantship or a volunteer position with intention and humbleness, not thinking they know everything and instead focusing on the position as a learning experience.
These teaching assistantships are a great way to enter the field of TESOL, to get experience first to then inform your next step as a professional. You might then move on to get a master's or a certificate of some kind, or decide that maybe teaching isn't for you, but you went into the experience with thoughtfulness and integrity.
Right, because once you have this experience and start learning more about the field of TESOL, you'll quickly realize what a vast field it is and how little you know about it. And that's why ignorance is bliss, right?
Ignorance is bliss, truly. But yeah, even later in your career, you still feel like you're not an expert on everything. Like you're confident in doing certain things, but every time I try a new thing that, or like I'm teaching a new skill in a different way, I'm a little tentative about it because I'm doing this for the first time. But I read about this thing and I need to try this to expand my horizons. That's not formal training, but at least the formal training I have gave me the foundation to be able to go out and look at different things and find or look at different content and approaches and activities that are out there that I might be able to try and evaluate and decide if that's something I want to incorporate or not.
No, for sure. It's an ongoing learning process. And there's no prescribed order for how you engage in gaining experience in formal training.
True.
But I do want to say that with formal MA TESOL or MED TESOL and certificate programs, not all programs are created equal. If you're looking into a program, try to find out specifically how much real classroom experience you're going to get. Reading about teaching and theorizing about the efficacy of a certain activity in a certain context is a good starting point. But you really need that exposure to real language learning humans, I think, to get a feel for what you're doing. Teachers I've worked with in the past have actually told me about programs that rely solely on observations of quote-unquote master teachers and mini lesson simulations to form the foundation of student teachers.
I mean, the more experience, the better, especially if you connect it with theory that explains and supports the why. So while we're advocating for formal training before entering the TESOL field, we do maintain that just coursework won't cut it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth mentioning, too, that more extensive formal training allows you a wider breadth of exposure to other opportunities in the field as well.
Right.
Like, if you decide you're going to teach and you get the credentials to do that, right, assuming the country you're in requires that of you as a native speaker in particular, you can teach, but that's it, right?
Yeah.
It stops there. Going through more extensive coursework exposes you to all of the inner workings of successful instruction, logistics and administrative stuff, assessment, content and curricular development, ed tech, and just so much more. There's a richness there that you miss out on when you beeline it right to classroom instruction.
Yeah, totally agree. And if you are abroad and enjoying your experience in the classroom, but you decide you want to move up, formal training can support you in that.
Okay, Anna, so we've examined some of the benefits that come with formal training in the field, but as we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned right at the beginning of this conversation. Backpacker English teachers cheapen the profession, often making very close to, if not as much as, someone with formal training. So let me play the devil's advocate here and ask you, why would I bother getting a master's degree if someone without one can have the same opportunities teaching EFL abroad and make very close to the same amount of money, if not the same as me?
I was worried you would ask that. Well, if it's just about the money, that's one thing. But then we need to consider quality. Like, you know those classes where you might have subbed or something and they're like, oh my gosh, we learned so much more from you than from our usual teacher. Can you come again? Like, I can't say, I can't say anything against the teacher in that situation because that would be inappropriate. But that's where you realize, wow, maybe these students would be benefiting much more from this class that they're paying for if their teacher had more of a formalized relationship with the subject.
Right. And I think you have to ask yourself if you're delivering the highest form of instruction to your students, or are you just strolling into a class and you're oozing confidence because of your English? Yeah, I'm painting a picture here.
Yeah.
But do you have the foundation to back up that confidence that you boast?
So maybe it's less of an argument for formal teaching or training experience and just more of an argument for taking teaching seriously and recognizing that there is work to be done. We all need to be practicing independent professional development, read articles, listen to podcasts, participate in PLNs. Just do more than the bare minimum for your students.
Don't just skate by because you think no one notices. It really becomes a moral question at that point, I think.
Absolutely.
So, listeners, we're curious about you. How did you come into the field of teaching language? Did you go through a short-term program or have self-guided experiential learning? Get a certificate or a graduate degree in the field? And do you see the advantage of any path in particular?
You can join the conversation on our various social media accounts. Email us via our contact form at teacherthinkaloud.com or comment via Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. We welcome your reflections, questions, and ideas.
And for more resources related to today's topic, take a look at our website and our podcast Anchor page, anchor.fm/teacherthinkaloud. And to make a donation or buy some podcast swag, head over to teacherthinkaloud.com/support-us.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Teacher Think Aloud podcast. And until next time, happy teaching
and happy reflecting.